So it turns out I didn't make everybody happy last night with my homily. And I'm not likely to make everybody happy with my homily today. But I don't mean to offend, because if I do offend, I mean to offend both sides. I plan to be an equal opportunity offender. But this is a reading about the end times, when evil has had its day, when evil seems to have its day, because we have to remember that Jesus never promised. We have to remember that the resurrection happened after that, not before it. And Jesus makes it clear. There's no promise from Jesus that the world is going to be perfect and wonderful. And Jesus makes it very clear that we might get persecuted and we might get crucified before the resurrection happens. Jesus is talking about the end times. And the end times are the time when evil has had its day. Evil has having its day. And the people who are the heroes when that happens are the martyrs, the people who gave a life for the truth. And they might get hurt in the process. But Jesus says in that time, the best thing is to speak from the heart. Don't prepare a great big homily, but speak from the heart. And so I'm going to simply speak from the heart tonight, this morning. I'm going to try to. I don't know if you've ever been hiking. If you've ever been hiking, you probably know the experience. I used to hike with my brothers a lot in the Olympics. You know the experience of being in the underbrush maybe, and you've kind of lost your way. You're not really quite sure where you are, and you're starting to get a little nervous inside because you might get lost out there. And then all of a sudden you break through the bushes and you're in a clearing. And then you see there's a rock or a hill, and you say, okay, we have to stop, and we got to get our bearings here. We're not just going to plunge into the bushes again and get lost. And you climb that hill or you climb that rock and you get the big viewpoint. You get the view of the whole. And you get your bearings. And then, after resting and catching your breath, you go into the bushes again. Because now you know the direction to go in. And I feel like that's precisely what we need to do in the coming weeks. We have broken into a clearing after getting lost, and most of us have gotten lost in some way, and I'm not talking about parties, I'm talking about everybody, has gotten a little bit lost in the craziness of the election. And maybe I'm just talking about me. You may be fine. But I think we've gotten a little bit lost. The world I see and hear from has gotten a little bit lost. And as someone has said, we have just been through a moral 9/11. We have just been through a moral 9/11. And the trouble is, nobody from the outside did it to us. We did it to ourselves from the inside. And that's what I believe. That's what I feel like in my heart, is that we have been through a 9/11, a moral 9/11, and we did it to ourselves. And it's time for us to break into this clearing and climb up on a rock and take a look around and get our bearings again and get the direction that our lives are going in, the direction our country needs to go in. And we need to get it straight so that we know where to go from here. I was once having a crisis in my young Jesuit life, and I went to a spiritual director, an older spiritual director that I have a lot of respect for. And I told him about, and I was so far falling apart about all the crises in my life. And he listened to me for a long time, and then he said to me, Jerry, what you're talking about is not worth 10 minutes of losing your integrity for. It's not worth losing your integrity for 10 minutes over that. And I said, no, you don't understand. You don't know how much I have to lose. It is worth losing my integrity over. I could lose this, I could lose this, I could lose this. You don't understand. And he said, Jerry, It is not worth losing your integrity for 10 minutes over what you're telling me about. And I didn't believe it. But this is 20 years later, and he was absolutely right. There was nothing worth losing my integrity for even 10 minutes. He was absolutely right. What he had tried to do is what St. Paul says in our reading. He tried, because St. Paul talks about people in the community who are disordered. They're causing disorder, and they're disordered. And what that man tried to do for me was to order my soul again, and to get my priorities and my values straight, so that my soul was ordered, so I could order my world. And that's precisely what we believe. Of course, that's what our faith tells us. There is a hierarchy of values. We stack our values up. We find our highest value and we put it up there, and then we put the next highest value, and then we put the next, and then we have our lowest values. And we do it spontaneously because that's the way the human spirit is wired. The Spirit of God lives in our spirit, and the way it is wired is that we stack up our values by priorities. And when we get the values out of order, we are disordered. Our souls are disordered, and when our souls are disordered, we disorder our families and our cities and our relationships and our country. And so every once in a while, we have to get into that clearing and slow down and see and get our souls back in order. There is an order in our souls that orders us so that we can then order everything else. Because in our culture, we have this idea that if you just get the right laws and the right political party and the right information and the right policies, if you just get the outside order okay, everything will be okay. But our ancestors never believed that. Look at the classical wisdom of our civilization. And what they teach is that you can never order the outside until you order the inside too. We have to order our souls before we can order anything else. And I think, well, let me say it personally. My soul got out of disorder. It got disordered. It got out of order in this election. Maybe your soul did too. The first value is divine values. The values of God and the teachings and the life of Jesus Christ, and the values embodied in the life, death, and Jesus Christ are the highest value. Number one, top of the list. Nothing can take that place. But I've been tempted during this time to an idolatry, to put a political party up at the highest value, to put a politician up at the highest value, to put a party politics up at the highest value. And that's idolatry. I'm guilty of idolatry. Because for a few moments, I lost my way, and I thought, if we could just get this political party or this politician, there would be some kind of salvation. And that's idolatry. And Jesus makes that clear. Jesus is talking about a time that's a lot worse than the time we're in, and he makes it clear that it is trust in God and perseverance in trust in God that is the highest value. And to believe in party politics in such a way that we put it up that high is idolatry. Plain and simple. It's an offense against God. And we need to get reordered. I need to get my soul reordered. Because the second value after the divine values of Jesus Christ are personal values. And that means our own integrity. And that means that there is no election that is worth losing our integrity for 10 minutes over. For not even 10 minutes. And because we have to be able to our job as Christians are to communicate the divine values of Jesus Christ to the world. And we're never going to be able to communicate his values unless we have gotten to a certain place, a certain core of our own integrity. Because who's going to believe us otherwise? Who's going to take our word for anything? Who's going to believe the words and the values of Jesus if we can't come to them with a certain core of integrity that we've attained in our own lives? And if we're spouting values and we have not got our own personal integrity, we're disordered. Our souls are disordered, and now we're disordering everything else. The first value is the highest values are divine values. The second are the personal values. And the place of integrity that we have carved out in this world by the hard decisions that we have made. And we have made ourselves a person with a core of integrity. That it's not worth losing for 10 minutes over an election. And the third value are cultural values. They're the values in the hearts and the minds of everybody in a parish, everybody in the city, everybody in a country, that we all have to have some level of agreement upon to have any kind of unity, any kind of working together. So we're not working at cross purposes, as if we were two different countries and a country divided against itself. And this is a big battlefield, I know a lot. This is a big battlefield in the Catholic world and in our culture. But you know what? We can say it really simply. There is a battle in life, and it's not a battle against people. It is a battle, first of all, the battle of our hearts. And when we battle with people, it's because we lost the battle in here, first of all. We lose the battle here first, and then we go battle with somebody else. And the battle in here is always about a battle against irrationality and bias. Every kind of bias. We have to have a fight against every kind of bias. And it's not a fight against people. It is, first of all, the battle in here against the battle in my heart. Any kind of bias against any kind of people for their ideology or their political party, bias against any person of any color because of their color, bias of anybody because of their culture or their religion. Bias is something we fight against as Catholics and Christians. It's always a struggle. It will always be a fight. And it's not a fight between people. It is a fight against, first of all, in my own heart. And when I lose that battle, I start fighting with people. And the battle is always against any kind of bias and any kind of irrationality, where we don't use our heads and the intelligence that God gave us as a gift. We don't use our heads intelligently and responsibly. We just react. Instead of responding thoughtfully and prayerfully with intelligence and with responsibility. And believe me, I have been tempted to do a lot of that, to just react. And when we react, it's usually one of three things. It's either we go forward to people and we fight with them, or we back away from them and say, I'm just, count me out, I'm going out. Or we try to make peace and say, I'm sorry, and we try to help. And those are spontaneous reactions. And that's not what we need now. We do not need spontaneous. We don't need mine. I can tell you that. We don't need my spontaneous reactions. Right now, we need responses. Thoughtful, prayerful responses. When our souls are ordered with the highest values of Jesus Christ and our personal integrity intact. And then the fight, the interior fight against every kind of bias and every kind of irrationality, no matter where it is or who it's against. That's an ordered soul. And then the fourth value is the political value. It's the realm of politics and the economy and technology, the social setup. That's the place of party politics. And if we take party politics and we move them up higher than any of those other values, our soul is disordered. That's disordered. And believe me, I have been tempted to do that. And I have in my own interior. I've let my soul get disordered. because those values are made to shape and to form the political arena. And in this country, we've taken the politics and we put it up to the top, and it shapes everything else. And that's disorder. And if we participate in it, it's disorder. We become part of the problem instead of part of the solution. So the other day, I was pretty disturbed about my own disordered soul and what I would say to you, and afraid of what I would say to you that would just cause more problems. There would just be somebody who's on one side or the other, and I'm not. And I've made it clear in this assembly before that there's two things that bore me to death. One is the far right and one's the far left. I don't care for any, they both bore me silly, because I don't think either one of them has any answers. And all I hear is the same thing over and over again from all of them, and all they do is put a line and throw rocks at each other, and it doesn't change anything. But I'm ready to fight. But it's not going to be a fighting of people. I am convinced that I am going to have to fight. And it's going to be to fight bias and irrationality. It's going to have to be a fight against people who say, I want to make the world better. And when they say better, what they mean is better for me and nobody else. That I'll fight against. When people say, I want the world to be a better place, that means I want my wallet to be bigger, I'll fight against that. If that's all that means. If all it means is I want it to be better for me and people with my skin color, or people with my educational level, or people at my level of economic attainment, I'll fight that. But I'm not going to fight people. I'm not going to fight people. Because the first battle is the battle in here. And when people are fighting on the outside, what it means is they lost a battle in here already. And it means they're a victim too, because they lost the worst battle already. They lost the battle in their heart for their own integrity and for the order of their own souls. And now they're a victim. They're a victim of irrationality and bias. And I have to care about that too. And I have to fight for them. So nice talk, tough talk. It's like John Wayne. Somebody said to John Wayne in one of those movies when he was talking tough. They said, tough talk from a fat man. I thought that was funny. So I got in my car. I said, this is nice talk, but I better do something. But that's got to be more than talk. So I got in my car and I went down. I drove past a place I've driven past many times but never stopped. The Islamic Community Center, the Islamic Center of Tacoma. And I got out of the car and I decided I was going to go meet the imam. It was their version of a priest. And I wanted to look him in the eye and I wanted to shake his hand. And I wanted to say to him, if you're a man of integrity, then I want to get to know you and I want to stand with you against any irrational bias and irrationality against you. I'll stand with you if you're a person of integrity. And I'll stand against anybody who fights that. And I don't care who they are or what party they belong to or who they voted for. I'll stand for integrity. And if you've got it, I'll stand with you. Now, because I'm the person who just sort of gets in the car and goes off and does something without calling first, he wasn't home. So then I had to do the reasonable thing and call him up and say, can I make an appointment with you? But I am going to make an appointment with him. And I'm going to hang out at that mosque, if they will let me, so I can get to know those people. Because that's one way for me to say no against irrationality and bias. Is simply to say no. My struggle is with you, not with people. When we come to Mass, What we do when we come here is we order our souls all over again. Isn't that what happens when we go to Mass and we hear the words of God and we hear the values of Jesus Christ and we hear about the people who have lived with integrity, and we see some of the best people we know, the people who can say, like Paul said, imitate me. I could be an example for you. Imitate me. Can we say that? We're going to get judged we're going to get judged three ways. Everybody here is judged three ways. We are judged by God. We're going to have to stand before God. I am going to have to stand before God and say, I engaged in idolatry for a little while because I got caught up in the craziness, the insanity, and the craziness of some election. I'm going to have to ask for the forgiveness of God for that. And we're going to be judged by our own conscience. And my conscience tells me that my spontaneous reactions, which is to fight and yell and scream, are wrong. That what I need are responses, thoughtful, prayerful, intelligent, responsible responses. And my conscience has judged me already and told me, knock it off. And we will stand before history and be judged by it. Our children and my nieces and my grandnieces are someday going to say, Father, you lived through the moral 9/11 that was the craziness of the election of 2016. How brave were you when you faced the challenges of it? How brave were you? How did you face the challenges of this time? Tell us about it. Tell us how you were an example that we can follow. And I will be ashamed to tell them. I will be ashamed to tell them that it took me months and months and months to get to the imam down the road. And I don't care who knows it. And so we come here to get our souls ordered again with the highest values, the divine values of God. The second value is our own integrity, that it's not worth losing for 10 minutes. For the cultural values that our church works for in all of society, all of the time. To work against irrationality and bias. And fourth of all, for our political values. To be people who can then order the political realm for the good of all. That's what we come here for. And so as we come to this altar and this table and receive the body and the blood of Christ, let's just remember this. There is no election in the world that is worth losing our integrity over for 10 minutes.